Most NBA players are praised for beating the odds, rising from nothing to become stars. And while that's true for some, it's not the case for all. A number of NBA superstars actually came from comfortable, even privileged backgrounds that gave them a major head start. In this video, we'll compare players who had to fight through poverty, instability, and adversity to make the league versus those who grew up with wealth, access, and an NBA blueprint already laid out for them. Starting with Jimmy Butler, who didn't just grow up in poverty, but in abandonment. Born in Tomball, Texas, a small town outside Houston, his childhood was marked by instability and hardship. His father left when he was an infant, and his mother eventually followed suit, kicking him out at just 13 years old with 7 brutal words. "I don't like the look of you." Suddenly homeless, with no family, no income, and nowhere to go, Jimmy had to survive by crashing on friends' couches, relying solely on his will to keep going. Some nights he didn't know where he'd sleep. Some days he didn't know when he'd eat.
How would you characterize your childhood from, let's say, around 12 or 13 on up?
I think it was hard. I had to grow up at a young age, and I had to be able to not really take care of myself. I had help, but I was on my own for the most part, and that's the way I felt.
He had no access to elite training camps or prestigious programs. His clothes were hand-me-downs. His life was survival, and the odds of someone in that position making it to the NBA were nearly impossible. But Jimmy didn't let that define him. He turned pain into passion, rejection into resilience. With no scouts watching, no rankings or viral clips, he played high school ball under the radar. After graduation, he didn't go to Duke or Kentucky. He went to Tyler Junior College. No spotlight, no glamour, just opportunity. And that was enough. From Tyler, he transferred to Marquette, where he earned every minute on the court.
Butler, Marquette.
He wasn't flashy. He wasn't a scorer in the headlines, but he played with unmatched grit, especially on defense, because in many ways, the fight on the court mirrored the fight of his life. In 2011, he was drafted 30th overall, barely in the first round.
With the 30th pick in the 2011 draft, the Chicago Bulls select Jimmy Butler from Marquette University.
Not a top pick, not a future superstar, but Butler never needed validation. He needed a shot, and once he got it, he never looked back.
Butler reversing.
Today, Jimmy Butler is one of the fiercest competitors in the league, a 6-time All-Star, a 5-time All-Defensive player, and the emotional leader of every team he's been on. When he carried the Miami Heat to the 2020 NBA Finals in the bubble, and again to the 2023 Finals, he wasn't just chasing a title, he was showing the world that grit can beat privilege, every single time. But not every player has to face struggle like Jimmy, for example. Stephen Curry, whose rise to NBA superstardom is often framed as an underdog story, the undersized, overlooked kid who proved everyone wrong. But peel back the layers, and the truth is more complex. Steph was never a true underdog. He came from privilege, not just financial stability, but NBA-level access. Steph is the son of Del Curry, a 16-year NBA veteran and one of the league's premier shooters of his time. While most kids dreamed of visiting an NBA locker room, Steph grew up inside one. He had a front-row seat to the game, watching professionals train, studying film, and soaking in elite basketball IQ from the earliest age. His education in the sport didn't come from blacktop courts or neighborhood leagues. It came from within the system itself. He was raised in the Charlotte suburbs, attended the well-regarded Charlotte Christian School, and grew up in a household where stability wasn't a concern. He never had to navigate poverty, violence, or uncertainty. His environment allowed him to focus entirely on his academics and basketball development, a luxury many talented athletes never get. When it came to training, Steph had access to top-tier resources. He worked with professional trainers and shooting coaches before he was even a teenager. His father not only guided his mechanics but prepared him mentally for what the NBA demands. While others patched together training routines from free resources or borrowed time in gyms, Steph had structure, guidance, and elite mentorship from day one. To be clear, none of this discounts his work ethic. Steph's rise to becoming the greatest shooter in NBA history didn't happen by accident. He trained relentlessly, refined his craft obsessively, and pushed past limits that many thought he'd never exceed. But it's important to acknowledge that he didn't start from the bottom. He didn't have to juggle jobs, dodge violence, or miss practices due to transportation issues. He had a clean runway and a guide by his side. In the race to the NBA, Steph didn't just start ahead, he started with a map, a mentor, and a support system that cleared the path. His story isn't one of overcoming impossible odds. It's one of maximizing a head start and running farther than anyone ever imagined. Steph Curry was surely born with a silver spoon. But this wasn't the case for Giannis Antetokounmpo, whose journey to NBA greatness didn't begin in a gym. It began on the streets of Athens, Greece, where he and his brothers sold sunglasses and DVDs to help their family survive. Before he became a two-time MVP and NBA champion, Giannis was the child of undocumented Nigerian immigrants living in constant fear of poverty, deportation, and hunger. Born in 1994, Giannis spent most of his childhood stateless. He didn't receive Greek citizenship until nearly 18. Without legal documentation, his parents couldn't find stable work, so the entire family hustled. After school, Giannis and his older brother Thanasis roamed the streets, selling whatever they could just to keep the lights on. Meals were often skipped. Hunger wasn't a choice. It was a reality. Basketball wasn't part of some master plan. It was an escape. He discovered the sport at 13 and began playing for a local club, Philatletikos. But even that came with challenges. His family couldn't afford gear, so he shared sneakers with his brothers, alternating during games and practices. Getting to the gym meant walking miles. Sometimes he played on an empty stomach. On one occasion, he even fainted during a game from sheer exhaustion and lack of food. Despite his raw talent and incredible athleticism, Giannis didn't attract the spotlight. He played in Greece's second-tier league, far from where scouts usually looked. His highlight tapes were low quality, and his name was unknown outside of a few circles. If it weren't for a handful of scouts who saw his potential, the world might have missed out on him entirely.
What is your goal for your career?
I want to be an NBA player.
His rise wasn't powered by connections or hype, it was built on grit. Even after the Milwaukee Bucks drafted him 15th overall in 2013, the struggle didn't vanish. Early in his NBA career, Giannis was still wiring most of his salary back home. In one unforgettable moment, he sent so much money to his family that he couldn't afford a cab to the arena and had to run miles just to make it in time. That wasn't a headline grabber. That was his reality. And that's what makes his story extraordinary. Every dunk, every block, every MVP trophy isn't just about talent, it's about survival, sacrifice, and relentless will. Giannis didn't just overcome the odds, he demolished them. Giannis surely had to struggle for his dream, but is there any struggle for a player whose father was no one overall pick? Klay Thompson didn't have to struggle for a shot at the NBA, not because he lacked work ethic, but because his environment was designed for success from the very beginning. Born into a professional athlete's household, Klay grew up surrounded by the blueprint for greatness. His father, Michael Thompson, was the #1 first overall pick in the 1978 NBA draft and a two-time champion with the Showtime Lakers. So when Klay was learning to dribble and shoot, he wasn't doing it on cracked pavement. He was doing it under the guidance of someone who had already made it. Raised in Southern California and later Oregon, Klay had access to resources most young athletes only dream of. He attended Santa Margarita Catholic High School, a well-funded private institution with a strong athletic program. He never had to worry about having the right shoes, finding gym access, or whether a scout would show up. With family support, financial stability, and his father's reputation, Klay was already steps ahead before college ever entered the picture. He trained year-round, competed in elite tournaments, and benefited from high-level coaching and mentorship from NBA veterans. His home life offered nutrition, recovery, structure, and, most importantly, freedom from the distractions of survival. He wasn't skipping practice to work a part-time job. He wasn't worried about food or transportation. His battles were on the court, not off it. When he chose Washington State University, it wasn't because he was overlooked, it was a calculated move. And once there, he thrived. With his size, shooting ability, and polished game, all cultivated through years of preparation, Klay stood out. By the time the 2011 NBA draft arrived, he was more than ready. Not just as a shooter, but as a product of years of structure, support, and opportunity. None of this is to say Klay didn't earn his success. He absolutely did. But context matters. He didn't have to claw his way into a gym. He didn't need someone to take a chance on him. His last name opened doors. His father provided wisdom. His upbringing gave him a head start. In a league filled with stories of adversity and survival, Klay's journey is different. It's not about beating the odds, it's about having a smoother path and making the most of it. And that's a reminder, in sports, as in life, talent is only part of the story. Access matters too. But not everyone's father is a Neno.1 pick. Few players have to go through intense hard work. Same was for Allen Iverson, whose journey to NBA stardom is rooted in struggle, resilience, and unshakable grit. Growing up in Hampton, Virginia, he was raised by a single mother in a neighborhood riddled with poverty and violence. From a young age, Iverson had to navigate a world where safety was uncertain and opportunity was scarce. Unlike players who came up through elite training academies or stable support systems, Iverson had none of that. There were no private coaches or structured workout plans. He honed his skills on outdoor courts, often wearing worn-out shoes and dealing with real-life distractions that extended far beyond the game. Meals weren't guaranteed, resources were few, but his willpower was limitless. His toughness wasn't just physical, it was born from years of surviving against the odds. High school was turbulent. A legal incident nearly cost him everything, threatening to erase his future. But basketball wasn't just a passion, it was his escape, his anchor, and his only shot at a different life. Every achievement was earned the hard way, without the safety nets many young athletes take for granted. Iverson's playing style mirrored his upbringing, fearless, relentless, and unapologetically raw. His explosive speed, unmatched scoring ability, and take-no-prisoners mentality reflected a player who never expected anything to be handed to him. He fought for every inch, and it showed. From the streets of Hampton to becoming an 11-time NBA All-Star and a Hall of Famer, Iverson's rise is one of the most powerful examples of perseverance in sports. His story stands in sharp contrast to those who enter the league with access, privilege, and a clear path. Iverson's legacy reminds us that greatness isn't always born in comfort. It's often forged in adversity. And while his success proves what talent and heart can accomplish, it also underscores the unequal starting lines many athletes face. Allen Iverson had to claw his way out of poverty just to get a shot. But what does it feel like to grow up privileged, with a father who already played the game overseas? Kobe Bryant's legacy is often defined by his relentless work ethic and competitive fire. But to fully understand his journey, it's important to also recognize the advantages that shaped his path. Born in Philadelphia, Kobe was raised in a basketball family. His father, Joe Jellybean Bryant, played in the NBA and later pursued a professional career overseas. As a result, Kobe spent much of his childhood immersed in basketball culture, traveling through Europe, observing different playing styles, and developing a global perspective on the game that few young athletes are exposed to. From an early age, Kobe had access to high-level coaching, elite training environments, and mentors who understood the professional demands of the sport. He didn't have to fight for gym access or wait for someone to notice him. His household revolved around the game, and his father's experience gave him a front-row seat to what it took to succeed. Off the court, Kobe enjoyed stability, discipline, and education. He attended quality schools with strong athletic programs and benefited from a family that emphasized structure, hard work, and excellence. The now famous Mamba mentality wasn't just something Kobe discovered. It was something nurtured in a supportive, basketball-centric environment where greatness was expected, not just imagined. His early access to resources and guidance allowed Kobe to refine his skills far ahead of his peers. Entering the NBA straight out of high school, an achievement few players manage, was made possible not only by talent and drive, but also by years of preparation and exposure few others had. Kobe's 20-year career with the Lakers cemented him as one of the greatest scorers and fiercest competitors in NBA history. His success was undoubtedly earned through intense effort and sacrifice, but it was also built on a strong foundation, one that gave him every tool to thrive. Kobe's story is a powerful reminder that even in a league built on talent and determination, the starting line matters. While his journey demanded focus and discipline, it was also guided by access, mentorship, and opportunity. Advantages that helped turn potential into greatness. Dennis Rodman's journey to the NBA wasn't just improbable, it was almost impossible. Born on May 13, 1961 in Trenton, New Jersey, Dennis was one of many children his father, Philander Rodman, had before abandoning the family. By the time Dennis was 3, his father was gone, fleeing to the Philippines and leaving his mother, Shirley, to raise him and his 2 sisters entirely on her own. They moved to the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas, Texas, a place riddled with crime, poverty, and despair. Shirley worked multiple jobs, often juggling 3 at a time just to put food on the table. But even then, it was barely enough. Rodman later admitted there were times he ate just once a day and wore the same pair of clothes for weeks. In school, Dennis was shy, awkward, and overlooked. He wasn't a star athlete or a standout student. At 5 feet 6 inches, he was cut from the high school basketball team 3 times and never stood out in any sport. He felt invisible, even at home, where his sisters, both successful in basketball, drew all the attention. After graduation, Rodman didn't go to college. He didn't have the grades, the money, or the confidence. Instead, he worked as a janitor at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, cleaning toilets and sweeping floors for minimum wage. He had no direction, no support system, and no hope. Some nights, he'd sleep in his car or crash wherever someone would let him. He even resorted to stealing from luggage at the airport, not out of greed, but hunger. Then, almost by fate, a growth spurt hit. Rodman shot up to 6 feet 7 inches in less than a year. That physical change, paired with his raw hustle, earned him a spot at Cook County College. He flunked out after one semester but got a second chance at Southeastern Oklahoma State, where he averaged 25.7 points and 15.7 rebounds per game. NBA scouts finally took notice of the once-forgotten janitor. In 1986, the Detroit Pistons selected Rodman 27th overall. He entered the league with nothing, no fanfare, no hype. Just trauma, tenacity, and a survival instinct sharper than most.
So Kareem, blocked by Rodman, block again by Rodman.
Rodman didn't play for fame. He played because it was all he had. As we have seen the struggles of Rodman, now it's time to move on a player whose career earning was still less than his father's single-year earnings. Bill Laimbeer's path to the NBA was paved not with struggle, but with stability, opportunity, and privilege. A stark contrast to the hardship stories many of his peers carried. Born on May 19, 1957 in Boston, Massachusetts, Laimbeer was raised in a wealthy, upper-middle-class household. His father, William Laimbeer Sr., was a highly successful executive who climbed the ranks to become the CEO of Owens, Illinois, one of the largest glass container manufacturing companies in the world. That meant Bill never had to worry about food, shelter, or access. His life was comfortable from the beginning. He grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and later Los Angeles, attending private schools and enjoying a childhood surrounded by security and structure. He didn't face the dangers of inner-city life. He wasn't dodging violence or working odd jobs to survive. While other future NBA players were clawing their way out of poverty or homelessness, Laimbeer had financial stability and parental guidance at every step. He lived in a world where success wasn't just hoped for, it was expected. Unlike many young athletes who struggled to afford sneakers or find gym time, Laimbeer had access to elite athletic programs and the best equipment money could buy. He played high school ball at Palos Verdes High School, located in an affluent part of Southern California. There, he received quality coaching, facilities, and the benefit of playing in front of well-connected scouts. After high school, he briefly attended Notre Dame, then left to pursue a professional basketball career overseas, not out of desperation, but as a calculated career move. Even when he was drafted into the NBA by the Cleveland Cavaliers in 1979, Laimbeer wasn't fighting for survival. He was building on a strong foundation. When he was traded to the Detroit Pistons in 1982, he joined a blue-collar team but didn't share that background. Laimbeer became known for his physical play and tough guy image, but behind the mask was a man who had never truly struggled. He had never gone hungry, he had never been homeless. He didn't rise from the bottom. He was born near the top and used his advantages wisely. Bill Laimbeer's success wasn't just about grit, it was about access, resources, and a head start. Bill Laimbeer's road to NBA was one of the easiest, but it's not for everyone like. Derrick Rose's journey to the NBA wasn't just difficult. It was a miracle born out of hardship, danger, and relentless determination. Born on October 4, 1988, in the heart of Englewood, one of the most violent and impoverished neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago, Rose was raised by a single mother, Brenda, alongside his 3 older brothers. His father was absent from the beginning. With barely enough income to support the family, Brenda worked tirelessly to keep her boys out of the streets, but Englewood didn't make it easy. The environment Derrick grew up in was brutal. Gunshots weren't rare, they were part of the daily soundtrack. Drug activity, gang violence, and police sirens were just as common as basketball hoops. For many kids in his neighborhood, the streets swallowed potential before it ever had a chance to grow. But Brenda Rose made it her mission to protect Derrick. His older brothers, Reggie, Dwayne, and Alan, served as his bodyguards, mentors, and sometimes even his enforcers, shielding him from the dangers outside and pushing him toward the game that could save him. Rose didn't have access to elite private schools or personal trainers. He learned the game on cracked concrete courts and under flickering streetlights. He didn't train in polished gyms. He trained in survival. Despite his shy nature, his talent on the court was undeniable. By the time he was in high school at Simeon Career Academy, he was already making noise. But even as his star rose, the pressures didn't ease. His family was still struggling financially, and the weight of being the hope of the neighborhood was heavy. At Simeon, he led his team to back-to-back state titles, becoming one of the top high school prospects in the country. He went on to play for the University of Memphis under coach John Calipari, leading them to the national championship game. Then, in 2008, Derrick Rose became the #1 pick. First overall pick in the NBA draft by his hometown Chicago Bulls. A fairy tale moment for a kid who had grown up dodging bullets and poverty.
With the first pick in the 2008 NBA draft, the Chicago Bulls select Derrick Rose.
Rose didn't just make it out, he soared. He became the youngest MVP in NBA history at age 22 in 2011, electrifying fans with his explosive athleticism and quiet humility. But behind every highlight was a lifetime of hardship. Derrick Rose didn't have a head start, he had a fight. And he won. Living in Chicago in 2000s was surely very hard, but is your life hard when your father is in football? Grant Hill's path to NBA greatness was built not on struggle, but on privilege, stability, and elite access from the very beginning. Born on October 5, 1972, in Dallas, Texas, Grant was the son of Calvin Hill, a former NFL star and Ivy League graduate, and Janet Hill, a consultant and Wellesley College alumna who later served on the board of directors for major corporations. This wasn't a household scraping by to make ends meet. This was a home filled with success, education, and high expectations. While many NBA players come from broken homes or high-crime neighborhoods, Grant Hill was raised in Reston, Virginia, one of the most affluent suburbs in the country. His parents emphasized discipline, humility, and academic excellence. He lived in a two-parent household where structure and values were emphasized daily. There was no chaos, no violence, no fear of eviction or skipping meals. Hill was surrounded by opportunity. He attended South Lakes High School, a well-funded public school where he had access to quality facilities, strong academics, and elite basketball competition. Unlike players who had to chase exposure through street ball or Hope Scouts noticed them at underfunded gyms, Hill's talent was seen, nurtured, and elevated from an early age. He wasn't fighting for survival, he was building toward a carefully laid out future. Grant then chose to attend Duke University, not just a basketball powerhouse, but also one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the country. Under coach Mike Krzyzewski, he won 2 NCAA championships and became one of the most respected college players of his generation. By the time he entered the NBA in 1994, selected 3rd overall by the Detroit Pistons, Hill was polished, educated, media-trained, and prepared for the spotlight. His smooth game, professionalism, and clean public image stood in contrast to many of his peers who had to overcome chaos just to get a tryout. Grant Hill didn't just have talent, he had guidance, connections, and a support system that made sure nothing derailed his path. His greatness was real, but it was also shaped by the rare advantage of a life where success was not just possible, it was expected.